It is a very interesting question, and I can give hypothesis more than tested answer. One thing is strength of some types of identities. Territorial identities are to a certain extent easier to keep alive for longer periods than other type of more class-based identities. In fact, if we think about the movements of the past, what was important for the labor movement was not only class consciousness, but also the sharing of community type of forms of life. And this, I think, has been an important characteristic of, in the Catalan case, the capacity to, say, occupy a territory and politicize already existing forms of identities that in the past were not politicized or not so oriented towards independence and secession, but were already there as culture, as language, as belief that it was possible to develop a better Catalonia, that it was easier to develop a better Catalonia than to develop a better Spain. So I think that is historical rootings of some types of territorial identities can explain the fact that this conflict is still mobilized. Another element, I think, is in the type of interactions, the fact that repression tends to strengthen identities. Either repression is successful and the conflict is eliminated, but this requires authoritarian dictators that have resources, and not even yet all authoritarian dictators have enough resources to repress broad communities. In democracies, this is always limited by various type of constraints. But there was a lot of repression in the Catalan case. It was repressions which has been considered by broad groups in the populations as unjust, as indiscriminate. The movement, I think, was able to keep legitimacy because it was able to remain peaceful and massive, faced to actions by the states which were perceived as challenging the very fundamental rights. So the movements organized for forms of symbolically very disruptive actions like non-recognized referendums, but for the activists, for many of my students that were in Barcelona at that time, the image of the Guardia Civil seizing the ballots and trying to physically force people not to express their opinions on the independence of Catalonia meant the impressions of a very unjust forms of interventions. Peaceful protesters being hit by heavy repression. It was almost 1,000 people sent to. But it was not only, I think, the repressive sides. There were in the Catalan conflicts many moments, many eventful protests that have contributed to strengthen ties, transforming the forms of mobilization, giving more leeway also to civil societies type of organizations, social movement forms of organizations, and symbolically representing this unity and massive support for the movements, even if the aims, federation, autonomy, and so on, was open. So moment like the others, the building of these huge chains of human being peacefully covering all the coast, the borders, are for sure very successful type of signs. As many of the ethno-nationalist movement, also the Catalan one, is very plural inside, so many people can identify with a left-wing or a right-wing visions, with a right-wing, not really, but more concerned with social justice, or more concerned with cultural rights, and there are different type of organizations and different political parties. So I think that it is this type of resources that have been mobilized, and in part they have been constructed during the action itself. Then there was the perceptions of, say, being able to keep the movement alive, so a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, which I think means that even when if in a few years mobilization declines, maybe a federalist solution is found, but the type of identities which have been created in this moment, the type of support by the young people, which were not the constituencies of Catalanism in the past, will remain. I think we have also, it is an important question, because we can also reflect on parallels with Latin America, where in several countries, especially the countries with higher presence of indigenous people, also there, the repression by neoliberal governments of class organizations meant the growth of other types of organizations, like the indigenous one. So repressing unions is sort of leave space for other forms of consent. And I think it is not by chance that it happens at the same time, because I think there's the dissatisfaction with the development of the crisis, the increasing inequalities inside Catalonia, were also fueling different forms of protest. And to a certain extent, there is a parallel, for instance, in Scotland, in which the autonomist type of concerns, nationalist type of identification, were interacting with conceptions of social justice. So not that all Catalanism, independentism is concerned with this, but there is enough space also for this type of visions, so that Catalanism became an important identity also for young people, or for people who were more concerned about social rights than about cultural rights.